Hello. So I'm just making this video to talk a little bit about the critical reflection paper. I thought what we could do would be I would share my screen, pull it up, and kind of go through it, and then also do the exercise a bit myself to kind of show you a bit more of what we're looking for in this assignment. Okay, so let me just share my screen. Okay, here it is. Okay, so we'll just go to the e-class assignments. So you can see here, if you haven't already been, you should start here with assignments. We're here, critical reflection paper now, so it will be your second assignment that's due. Here's the marking rubric. So I'll click on that and we can go through it together. So basically this assignment's can be worth 20% of your mark. It's about a 750 to 1,000 word paper. So again, it's not super long. 12-point font, double spaced, make sure you've got page numbers on there. And this is going to be very different than a research paper. So you are going to center yourself in this. Students are like, can I use first person? Of course you're using first person. This is a real exercise of critically reflecting on how you're engaging with things. So you're reflecting on your own experience with health in relation to who you are, your own identity. So I started talking about it a little bit in week 2 and about this idea that our social location influences the ways we interact with systems. So it's not a system that each of us are interacting with in the same ways. Our social location, who we are, what race, what gender, whether we have a disability or not, what religion we practice, outward signs of our identity very much influence the ways we interact with the system. So even though it's the same system, we are all interacting with it in different ways. And how we know this is based on the data in health inequities. So we know through data, we had a good example of that last week, that why women in neighborhoods with lower economic income, so neighborhoods where folks are making less money, have higher incidences of cervical cancer than women from high income areas. So that's telling us something. What is that? What's happening there? We know that Indigenous folks have very different health outcomes than their white counterparts. So what's happening there? So we want to kind of look at this, and the way I want us to understand that is through our own experience. So based on your social location, you're trying to critically reflect on the ways you interact with the health system, and you're going to focus on one. So you're going to use first person statements. It is a formal academic assignment, right? This is learning. This isn't, you're still using formal academic language to discuss your own experience. And often assignments like this can actually be harder to do than you researching, say, a more sort of formal essay. Why? Because you need to use critical analytical skills. So you need to think about why things are happening. So let's kind of go through the different pieces of the assignment. So firstly, you need to use your own experience. So you can't do research here. You can't talk to someone else about their experience. So, you know, you might have a friend who had a really traumatic experience interacting with the system. You can't go and ask them questions. You can't use their experience. This has to be based on you. So if you complete the assignment about someone else's experience, if you're talking to someone else, you will receive a 0, because that's you engaging in formal research, and we need to go through ethics procedures in order to do research. So when you're talking about yourself, it's your own experience. You don't need to. You're going to attend to all 4 parts of the assignment. So the assignment is very clearly portioned out into 4 parts. So make sure you are attending to each part. You don't have to spend equal time on each part, but you have to take up all 4 parts and know that you're being marked on all 4 parts. So give enough in each of the 4 parts in order to receive marks in those 4 parts. So this assignment's really meant for you to kind of explore your reactions and feelings to an area of learning or interaction that you have experienced. So can you tie that experience that you've had to larger concepts of intersectionality and equity? And then at the end, you're going to think about reflecting on ways that change can happen that would intervene in the interaction you had. And so that's kind of the, this assignment is kind of a mini exercise of this course. So in this course, we're learning about ways that interactions happen within a system, and then ways we can also intervene, right? So that can look different. So say if your interaction has been good, right? You want to take an experience of you being well supported in the system, then you can think about ways that that could happen for other folks. Based on social identity, social location. And if you've had a negative interaction and you're taking up a negative interaction, what are ways that you could, that would need to have intervention in order for that interaction to change? You need to use proper APA citations if you're referencing the article that we take up in the assignment, or if you're bringing anything else in. You don't have to. But if you are, you need to make sure that you're citing properly. So marks will be taken off if you don't use proper referencing, formatting, or grammar. So here's the marking rubric. So the first one, the first piece is your own reflection on the article. So you're gonna read the article, Racism Impacts Your Health by Timothy, and then you're going to give a reflection. I think often where students get stuck here is they kind of regurgitate things from the article. So say Timothy said this, or that's not what we're asking you to do. The assignment is asking you to do a reflection on the article. What is your reaction to that article? Are you angry? Is this new to you? Is this definitely not new to you? Why? Why are you reacting in this way? You could pick a piece that really stood out to you, but it has to be your reflection. You're reflecting on the article. You're not telling us what the article said. And then you can see across here, that's where you'd be allocated marks. So each of the 4 sections is marked out of 5. The next one is describe your identity. This one's hard sometimes because you feel like, well, you're marking me on my identity. So here, as I mentioned before, you only disclose what you feel safe. Your TA is reading this, marking this, so only disclose what you feel safe disclosing. And you'll have to think about that in terms of the interaction, because the interaction you're going to talk about, if you're talking about it in relation to your identity, you need to make sure those 2 pieces match up. So describe your identity. And again, at the end, I'll kind of go through this exercise myself. The third piece is describe an interaction with the healthcare system. So I did write healthcare system, but you can go larger. You can think about health in the expansive way we're thinking about it in this course. So most folks think about a direct interaction they've had, like in a hospital with a doctor, with a healthcare provider. But I've had students talk about larger issues. So thinking about carding for young Black men as an interaction with the system and how that impacts health. So you might want to go bigger. You also can think about lack of interaction, right? So that might be the piece you want to focus on. I had a really great assignment one time from a student who talked about this idea that every time she interacted with her family doctor around specific things around kind of women's health, the doctor would mention, we don't have data for Black women in this area. We don't have data for Black women in that area. So for her, that was the interaction she wanted to focus on. Why? Why don't we have that data? And how could she make informed decision with a lack of that data? So you can really take this in an expansive way. This idea of interaction in the system can be very broad. But again, you want to focus on a specific interaction. So don't just sort of talk about a large, malleable way over your life you've been interacting. You could say there's been a pattern and I want to describe this one. I think another piece where students get caught up here is that they don't want to, or may not be able to think about it in a way that interacts with their own identity, or may say, well, I don't have any significant interactions. So that's where this assignment is tough. You really have to think through what this looks like based on your social location. And so maybe you don't have extensive interaction with the system, or maybe your interactions have always been positive. That is what you need to get at then. Why is that? Why is that based on your own social location, or maybe who you've been interacting with in the system? So really dig deep in there. That's where the difficultness of this assignment lies, is for you to really do that critical reflecting work. And then the last one is exploring this idea that might dismantle barriers to health. So Timothy, in the article you're going to read, does a really great job of that, of thinking about systemic barriers. So not thinking about things like, not saying things like, you know, if there was no racism, then everything would be great. We need to think about specific ways that racism, sexism, ableism operate within our system, and then systemic ways we can intervene. So this isn't just about one doctor, you know, not taking a woman's concerns seriously, or a Black woman, you know, think about all the intersections of gender, race in there. So it's not just about one doctor, right? These are larger patterns we're trying to connect to this. And then these barriers need to be at systemic levels. So that's the sort of where the marking rubric is going to look. Are you able to do that in an exceptional way, in an excellent way, in a strong way, in a good way? What sort of, how deep is your analysis going? And marking's going to be on sort of a continuum. So looking at ways that you're able to really complicate things, that's where, how you'll be marked. So I want to give you an example and kind of think through a little bit. I could kind of start to do this exercise if I was doing it. So the first one I won't take up, because I'll move kind of into the second one, describe your own intersecting identity. So here I would talk about the idea that I have class privilege, I'm a white woman, and that shapes my interactions with the system. I won't think about a specific one now. I'll just talk a bit more about this idea that my interactions with the healthcare system are informed through that identity, right? So I'm able to maybe push back or challenge on doctors when they're, you know, giving me a diagnosis or asking me to conform to specific ways that we ask patients to act within our system. I feel safe enough based on my social location to push back or say, I want something different, or say, you know, I don't think that I'm comfortable doing this, so I don't want to do this. I want to try to find different alternatives before we go down that road. So that's definitely based on my social location. I'm not worried based on class, based on race, that I, you know, might not get good care or might be seen as pushing too much. So that's the way that I experience the system. I experience it in a positive way. I experience the system in a way that's working for me. And I know that that's based on my social location. That's not because I'm nice. It's not because I go along with things. It's based on social location in ways that my complaints are taken up in serious ways. And that's something that I have to reflect on, and that those are things that I bring into my own work as I approach my research and approach teaching, knowing that that is not the norm. And I think that's what I want us to really deeply think through in this assignment. So yeah, that's kind of what the assignment's asking us to do. So make sure you give yourself time and space to do this assignment. It's not something right at the last minute you're going to be able to kind of pull together. I want you to be thinking about it. So as you're listening to lecture, think about it. Think about it in terms of when you hear things, you know, right now, obviously COVID is just all over everything all the time. So we're kind of thinking about health a lot now. So thinking about those interactions through your identity, how has that shaped it? What do you want to, when you think about an interaction, what do you think was at play there? And don't hesitate to think that through in the assignment. So I think sometimes folks don't want to think about an interaction as maybe being kind of steeped in sexism or being steeped in racism. This is the space to think that through. So yeah, I hope that it is something that will allow you to kind of exercise those critical thinking skills. If you have any questions, do send them in advance to your TA. If you're thinking about, well, I don't have any interactions, you know, then reach out to your TA and work that through with them. Another piece is that if you haven't had any interactions with the healthcare system in Canada, you can do this exercise from interactions with in your own home country. So that's okay. It doesn't have to be Canada's healthcare system. We're just thinking about the ways that systems interact with people in different ways. We all don't interact in the same way. So yeah, I hope this helps. If you have any questions, email me or email your TA. Thanks.